Chapter 12. Attract, don't repel, wealth. Whoever you are, regardless of your age, your education, or your occupation, you can attract wealth. You can also repel it. We say, attract, don't repel, wealth. This chapter tells you how you can make money. Would you like to be rich? Be truthful with yourself. Of course you would. Or, are you afraid to be rich? Perhaps you're sick, and because of this, you don't try to acquire wealth. If this be the case, just remember the experience of Milo C. Jones, about whom you heard in Chapter 2. Or, if you are a patient in a hospital, you can attract wealth by engaging in study, thinking, and planning time as George Stefik did. In a hospital bed, think. Time after time, as we have studied the careers of successful men, we have discovered that they date their own success from the day they picked up a self-improvement book. Never underestimate the value of a book. Books are tools, providing instruction which can launch you onto a bold new program and which can also light the dark days that any such program entails. George Stefik was convalescing at the Veterans Administration Hospital in Hines, Illinois. There he discovered by accident the value of thinking time. Financially, he was broke. While George was convalescing, he had a great deal of time on his hands. There wasn't too much to do except read and think. He read Think and Grow Rich, and he was ready. An idea occurred to him. Many laundries, George knew, fold their newly ironed shirts over a piece of cardboard to keep the shirts stiff and free from wrinkles. By writing a few letters, George learned that these shirt boards cost the laundries about $4 per thousand. His idea was to sell the boards for $1 a thousand. However, each one would carry an advertisement. The advertisers would, of course, pay for the space, and George would make a profit. George had an idea, and he tried to make it work. When he left the hospital, he got into action. New in the advertising field, he had his problems, but he finally developed successful sales techniques through what others term trial and error, and we term trial and success. George continued the custom he had started in the hospital to engage in study, thinking, and planning time each day. Even when George's business was moving ahead swiftly, he decided to increase his sales by increasing the efficiency of his service. The shirt boards, when withdrawn from the shirts, were not retained by the laundry's customers. Now he asked himself the question, how can I get families to keep these shirt boards with the advertisements on them? The solution flashed into his mind. What did he do? On one side of the shirt board, he continued to print an advertisement in black and white or in colors. On the other side, he added something new, an interesting game for the children, a delicious recipe for the wife, or a provocative crossword puzzle for the whole family. George tells about one husband who complained that his laundry bill had gone up in a sudden, unaccountable way. Then he discovered that his wife was sending in shirts to the laundry which ordinarily he would have worn another day, just to get more of George's recipes. But George didn't stop there. He was ambitious. He wanted to expand his business still further. Again he asked himself the question, how? And he found the answer. George Stefik gave the entire $1 per thousand he received from the laundries to the American Institute of Laundering. The Institute, in turn, recommended that each member help himself and his trade association by using George Stefik's shirt boards exclusively. And thus, George made another important discovery. The more you give of that which is good and desirable, the more you get. Now, a carefully planned thinking time session brought George Stefik considerable wealth. He discovered that a time apart is essential to any successful attraction of riches. It is in quiet that our best ideas occur to us. Don't make the mistake of believing that by a frantic kind of dashing around, you are being your most effective and efficient self. Don't assume that you are wasting time when you take time out for thought. Thought is the foundation upon which all else is built by man. Now, it isn't necessary for you to go to a hospital to establish the habit of reading good motivating books, to think, or to make plans. And your thinking, study, and planning sessions need not be too lengthy. If you invest only 1% of your time in a study, thinking, and planning session, it will make an amazing difference in the speed with which you reach your goals. Your day has 1,440 minutes in it. Invest 1% of that time in a study, thinking, and planning session, and you will be astounded at what those 14 minutes do for you. For it may surprise you to find that when you develop this habit, you will receive constructive ideas almost any time or anywhere you might be, while doing the dishes, or riding the bus, or while taking a bath. Be certain to use two of the greatest yet simplest working tools ever invented, tools used by a genius like Thomas Edison, a pencil and a piece of paper. For he always had handy paper and pencil, and thus you, like him, will record the ideas that come to you day or night. Another requirement to attract wealth is to learn how to set your goal. It is important for you to understand this. Few people, even when they realize its importance, really understand how to set a goal. Learn how to set your goals. There are 4 important things to keep in mind. A. Write down your goal. You will then begin to crystallize your thinking. The very act of thinking as you write will have a tendency to create an indelible impression in your memory. B. Give yourself a deadline. Specify a time for achieving your objective. This is important in motivating you. Set out in the direction of your goal and keep moving toward it. C. Set your standards high. Now, there seems to be a direct relationship between ease in achieving a goal and the strength of your motives. You have discovered for yourself in Chapter 9 how to motivate yourself at will, and in Chapter 10 how to motivate others. And the higher you set your major goal, generally speaking, the more concentrated will be the effort you make to achieve it. The reason? Logic will make it mandatory that you at least aim at an intermediate objective as well as an immediate one. So aim higher, and then have immediate and intermediate steps leading toward its achievement. The following question should stimulate your thinking. Where will you be and what will you be doing 10 years from today if you keep doing what you are doing now? D. Aim high. It is a peculiar thing that no more effort is required to aim high in life, to demand prosperity and abundance, than is required to accept misery and poverty. I bargained with life for a penny, and life would pay no more. However, I begged at evening when I counted my scanty store. For life is a just employer. It gives you what you ask. But once you have set the wages, why, you must bear the task. I worked for a menial's hire, only to learn dismayed that any wage I had asked of life, life would have willingly paid. You have to be bold enough to ask of life more than you may right now feel you are worth, because it is an observable fact that people tend to rise to meet demands that are put upon them. While it is exceedingly desirable that you blueprint your program from beginning to end, this is not always feasible. One doesn't always know all the answers between the beginning of a great enterprise or journey and its ending. But if you know where you are and where you want to be, and you start from where you are to get where you want to be, you will. If you keep properly motivated, move forward step by step until you get there. Take that first step. The important thing after setting a goal is taking action. A 63-year-old grandmother, Mrs. Charles Philippia, decided that she was going to walk from New York City to Miami, Florida. She reached Miami and while there was interviewed by newspapermen. They wanted to know if the idea of such a long journey on foot hadn't frightened her. How did she ever summon courage to make such a journey with her feet as her only mode of travel? "It doesn't take courage to take one step," replied Mrs. Philippia. "And that's all I did, really. I just took one step, and then I took another step, and then another, and here I am." Yes, you must take that first step. It makes no difference how much thinking and study time you spend. It will avail you little unless you also act. One of the authors was introduced to a man in Phoenix, Arizona by a friend. It was a rather odd introduction. Meet the man who received $1 million cash for a gold mine and now has the $1 million and also owns the mine. "How in the world did you manage such a thing?" came the question, asked with considerable awe. "Oh, I had an idea, but I didn't have any money. I did have a pick and a shovel, so I took my pick and my shovel and went out to make my idea a reality," he responded. "And then it occurred to me, if I would search for a gold mine and dig around the vein, should I find a mine, one of the large mining corporations could afford to work the mine, whereas I wouldn't have the necessary capital. You know, mining machinery costs money today. So I searched for and found a vein of gold. Every indication was that I had made a very rich strike. I sold it for $2 million. The terms were $1 million in cash and a first mortgage of $1 million. While mining operations were underway, the vein ran out. I informed the owners of the mining company that if they wanted to abandon the mine, I would take it back and cancel their mortgage. They accepted. So you see, I got $1 million cash for the mine and still have the $1 million and the mine. Wealth repelled with NMA. A positive mental attitude will attract wealth, but a negative mental attitude will do just the opposite. With a positive mental attitude, you will keep trying until you achieve the wealth you are seeking. Now, you might start with a positive mental attitude and make your first step forward. Yet you may become influenced by the negative side of your talisman and stop when you are just one step from reaching your destination. You may fail to employ one of the 17 success principles. Here's a very good example. Let's call our man Oscar. In the latter part of 1929, he was at the railroad station in Oklahoma City, where it was necessary for him to wait several hours for a train connection east. He had spent months in the western deserts in temperatures as high as 110 degrees. He was seeking oil for an eastern concern, and he was successful. Oscar was a graduate of MIT. It is said that he had combined the old divining rod, galvanometer, magnetometer, oscillograph, radio tubes, and other instruments into a doodlebug for detecting oil deposits. Now, Oscar had received word that the company he represented was insolvent. It had become bankrupt because the president had used the firm's large cash resources in speculation in the stock market. The market crashed in late 1929. Oscar was on his way home. He was out of a job, and the outlook was rather dismal. The influence of NMA began to exert a powerful influence on him. Because he had to wait several hours, he decided to occupy himself by setting up his instrument in the railroad station. The reading on his instrument was so high in its positive indication of oil deposits that Oscar, in a rage, impulsively kicked the instrument and destroyed it. You see, Oscar was frustrated. There couldn't be that much oil. There couldn't be that much oil, he shouted repeatedly in disgust. But Oscar was frustrated. He was under the influence of a negative mental attitude. The opportunity for which he had been searching lay at his very feet. He only had to make one step to reach it. But because of the influence of NMA, he refused to recognize it. He lost faith in his own invention. Had he been under the influence of PMA, he would have attracted wealth, not repelled it. Applied faith is one of the important 17 success principles. The test of your faith is whether you apply it at the time of your greatest need. NMA had led Oscar to believe that many of the things that he had faith in were wrong. As you recall, the Depression brought a fear of consciousness into the minds of many persons. Oscar was one. He had worked hard and sacrificed, yet he was out of a job through no fault of his own. The president of his company had been held in high esteem by Oscar, yet this man whom he trusted embezzled the company's funds. Now the machine that had proved its value in the past seemed to have gone haywire. Yes, Oscar was frustrated. When Oscar boarded the train at the Oklahoma City railroad station that day, he left his doodlebug behind, and he also left one of the nation's richest oil deposits. A short time later, Oklahoma City was found to be literally floating on oil. Oscar has become a living demonstration of the application of two principles. A positive mental attitude attracts wealth, and a negative mental attitude repels it. Wealth can be acquired on a modest salary. But you may say, all this about positive and negative mental attitudes is very fine for someone who's out to make $1 million, but I'm not really interested in making $1 million. Of course I want security. I want enough to live well and take care of the needs I will have someday when I retire. What about me if I am an office employee? What about me when I have just a fair salary? Now here's our answer. You too can acquire wealth. Wealth enough for security, or even wealth enough to become rich in spite of what you say. Just let the PMA influence of your talisman affect you favorably. We'll prove that this can be done. And if for some reason you aren't fully convinced, just read a book, The Richest Man in Babylon, and then make your first step forward. Keep going, and you'll have the financial security or wealth you are seeking. Now that's exactly what Mr. Osborne did. Mr. Osborne was a salaried employee, yet he acquired wealth. It wasn't so many years ago that he retired with the statement, "I now spend my time having my money make money for me while I do what I want to do." Again, the principle used by Mr. Osborne is so obvious that it is often unseen. The principle he learned, and the one that you also can employ, will now be stated in a very few words. In reading The Richest Man in Babylon, Mr. Osborne found that wealth could be acquired if you A. Just save 1 dime out of every dollar you earn. B. Each 6 months, invest your savings and interest or dividend returns from these savings and investments. And C. When you invest, seek expert advice on safe investments, and thus you won't gamble and lose your principal. Let us repeat. That's exactly what Mr. Osborne did. Just think of it. You can have security or wealth by saving only 1 dime out of each dollar you earn and investing it safely. When should you start? Do it now. Now let's contrast Mr. Osborne's experience with that of a man who had good physical health and read an inspirational book. He was 50 years old when he was introduced to Napoleon Hill. This man smiled when he said, "I read your book, Think and Grow Rich, many years ago, but I'm not rich." Napoleon Hill laughed and then replied seriously, "But you can be rich. Your future is ahead of you. You must prepare yourself to be ready. And in making yourself ready for the opportunities that are available to you, you must first develop a positive mental attitude." And the interesting thing is that this man did heed the author's advice. 5 years later, the man wasn't rich, but he had developed a positive mental attitude, and he was on his way to wealth. He had been many thousands of dollars in debt. Within the 5-year period, he had gotten completely out of debt and had begun making investments with the money he had saved. He developed PMA as he studied the book Think and Grow Rich. He did not only read it, he had learned to recognize principles and apply them. When the NMA side of his talisman was influencing him, he was like those workmen who blame their tools for poor craftsmanship. Have you ever blamed your tools? Where does the fault lie? If you own a perfect camera and use the right film, if you have the proper set of rules to take perfect pictures under all types of circumstances, if someone else takes perfect photographs with your camera but yours are failures, does the fault lie with the camera? Could it be that you have read the rules but haven't taken the time to understand them? Or, if you do understand them, that you don't apply the rules? Could it be that you will listen to Success Through a Positive Mental Attitude, a book that could change the entire course of your life for the better, without taking the time to understand, memorize self-motivators, learn the principles that will guarantee success, and apply them? Your answer will be evident to you by your action. Now it's not too late to learn. If you haven't learned by now, you might as well learn now. You will not succeed consistently unless you know and understand the rules. You will not continuously succeed unless you apply the rules. Therefore, take the time to understand and apply what you are hearing in this book. PMA will help you. The home of my dreams. Remember, The thought that you think and the statements you make regarding yourself determine your mental attitude. If you have a worthwhile objective, find the one reason why you can achieve it rather than the hundreds of reasons why you can't. One of the rules in obtaining what you want through PMA is to act once you have your sights on a goal. Another is, go the extra mile. W. Clement Stone tells of the following experience which illustrates both rules. One April evening, while I was visiting Frank and Claudia Noonan in Mexico City, Claudia commented, "I wish we could have a home in the Jardines del Pedregal de San Angel. This is the most desirable section of that beautiful city." "Why don't you?" I asked. Frank laughed and answered, "We don't have the money." "Does that make any difference if you know what you want?" I inquired. And then, without waiting for a response, I asked a question that I might ask of you. By the way, have you ever read an inspirational, motivating book like Think and Grow Rich, The Power of Positive Thinking, I Can, I Dare You, TNT, Applied Imagination, Turn on the Green Lights in Your Life, Acres of Diamonds, or The Magic of Believing? No, was the response. Thereupon, I told of several experiences of those persons who knew what they wanted, read an inspirational book, listened to its message, and then got into action. And I even told how years ago I purchased a new $30,000 home on my own terms with a $1,500 down payment, and how in due course it was completely paid for. I promised to send one of the recommended books. I did. Frank and Claudia Noonan were ready. It was the following December, while studying in my library, that I received a telephone call from Claudia, who said, "We just arrived from Mexico City, and the first thing Frank and I wish to do is to thank you." "Thank me for what?" "We want to thank you for our new home in the Jardines del Pedregal de San Angel." A few days later at dinner, Claudia explained. Late one Saturday afternoon, Frank and I were relaxing at home. Some friends from the States telephoned and asked if we could drive them to the Jardines del Pedregal de San Angel. It just so happened we were both rather exhausted, and besides, we had taken them there earlier in the week. Frank was ready to beg off when an expression used in the book flashed through his mind: go the extra mile. While driving them through this man-made paradise, I saw the home of my dreams, even the swimming pool I longed for. Claudia is the swimming champion Claudia Eckert. Frank bought it. Frank said, "You might like to know that although the property cost in excess of 500,000 pesos, I only made a deposit of 5,000 pesos. It costs less for our family to live in the Jardines del Pedregal de San Angel than in our former home." "Why is this?" I asked in surprise. "Well, we bought the two homes that were on the property instead of one. The rent from the one house is enough to make payments on the entire enterprise." Now this wasn't so surprising after all. It's quite common for a family to buy a duplex apartment and rent one and live in the other. What is surprising to a person without experience is how easy it is to get what you want by understanding and applying the success principles to be found in an autobiography or self-improvement book. Attract wealth with PMA, we say. You say, money makes money, and I have no money. This is a negative mental attitude. If you don't have money, use OPM. That's what the next chapter is all about. Pilot number 12. Thoughts to steer by. 1. If you know your specific destination and take the first step, you're on your way. 2. The test of your faith is whether you apply it when you are not in difficulty, as well as at the time of your greatest need. 3. If you don't succeed when you finally listen to and study success through a positive mental attitude, with whom does the fault lie? 4. The house of your dreams. You can have it. Like Frank and Claudia Noonan, you may buy two houses and rent one to pay for both. 5. Do you need to be in an accident or get sick and land in a hospital to establish the habit of regularly engaging in study, thinking, and planning time regarding your personal, family, or business life? 6. Have you made a start toward achieving desirable goals by A. Writing down each goal, B. Setting deadlines for reaching them, C. Setting high goals, and D. Inspecting your written statements daily? 7. Where will you be and what will you be doing 10 years from today if you keep on doing what you are doing now? 8. The Richest Man in Babylon. This book gives you a proven formula of success. A. Just save 1 dime out of every dollar you earn. B. Each 6 months, invest your savings and the interest or dividend returns from these savings and investments. C. Before you invest, seek expert advice on safe investments. D. If you need the money you are saving for living expenses or necessities, then work an extra hour or more so that you have no excuse for not saving 10% of your earnings. Engage in studying, thinking, and planning time with PMA.